What's on, guys? J-Hoyd back with you. Today, welcome back to Modern Warfare 2. We are back here playing some shipment because it seems like the Mosh Pit playlist, the CL Mosh Pit playlist, is just not fun, like, at all to play with all the people just straight up leaving. But I heard something more recently after the optics situation with a new roster and kind of issues with Dashy and Rambo and the coaching, and so many people are doing so many things with coaches and analysts and everything. And I wanted to talk about it because I saw this video from Optic that was formal talking about coaches, and I wanted to kind of get into this topic because I think it's actually a really good video and a good kind of topic to talk about. So what he was basically saying was coaches in Call of Duty are useless because they're just kind of like after the game, they're doing a couple of things that the other team doesn't want to do, and they kind of are just like an out of the game help. Whereas in Halo, they're in the game with you, they're communicating in the game with you, and they're standing behind you on the stage. So now that that guy got me thinking, okay, let's look at some of the other games like Counter-Strike. Those more notably have coaches. Okay, and then sometimes people have analysts as well, or, you know, a couple, like 2 or 3 coaches in total. Well, in Counter-Strike, there's, I don't know, I haven't watched it in a while, so I could be a little bit outdated on some of this information. But a lot of the times the coaches could only talk during timeouts or in between maps. I don't believe they were allowed to talk while the round is going on and while there's not a timeout. Now that's interesting because in Call of Duty, coaches, you know, at one point were a kind of like a random thing. They were just like staying behind you and talk crap to the other team. And then at one point they were like able to talk during the game. Then at some point they were no allowed, you know, they couldn't talk during the game. Then they could only talk in between games. And then they were just kind of like removed off the main stage. And there was, like, it switched around so many times. Now, personally, if I think of a coach, you could say coaches for everything are useless then. If it's just, okay, they talk to their teams, they, you know, tell them the breakoffs in Call of Duty, they tell them what the tendencies are of the other team, where they like to hit through. You could say that for any single esport, any single traditional sport, for anything, that coaches could be useless. But here's the thing. When I think of a coach, here's what I want. I want a neutral party that studies the game. In this case, let's just talk about Call of Duty, right? That studies the game, learns the spawns, and then honestly, I would have probably 2 or 3 coaches on my team. Because if you were to have just one coach to kind of be that neutral voice, to be that person that watches other teams and schedules scrims and, you know, does all that stuff, I think you could have a second or even a third coach kind of watching other teams and developing strategies, even watching challengers and developing strategies or a different way to look at a game, different ways to break, different ways to practice and learn a new style game, adapt to your game. Because if you just have one coach, he might have the same kind of mindset as your team already that, okay, yeah, that kind of fits in what we want to do. But then after that, if you guys don't adapt, don't change it, don't have, you know, another voice in there saying, hey, what if we try it this way? Then you're not really going to evolve. You could just be like, okay, well, this team had, you know, some success doing it this way, so let's try it this way. And there's only like one voice and one kind of collected decision that makes the gameplay very stale and you're not going to be able to adapt. Now, in Call of Duty, there's also a lot of teams that have a head coach / general manager. Now, okay, what does a GM do? Typically, he talks to agents, talks to the players, and kind of gets contracts, you know, to certain players, or, you know, if they have an academy team, then they scout players for that. But in the case of, I think, all but 2 teams in the league, I think, only 2 teams have challengers teams or academy teams or whatever you want to call them. But you're not seeing a GM's role really useful at all. Unless you have a system where you're scouting young players and bringing them into your challengers team or your academy team or whatever you want to call that team. Unless you have a GM that's kind of developing all the things outside of the game, included with the academy team, with with the branding and all that stuff. It's obviously it's way different in traditional sports because you have, let's just say you look at hockey, right? What's a GM's job? He has 2 basically full teams, sometimes 3 full teams to kind of manage. And then they have an assistant GM, lots of scouts, lots of behind the scenes staff. And they are constantly scouting, constantly looking at other teams, thinking about trades. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen in Call of Duty or even most esports because you got to figure out that chemistry. You got to figure out what team's going to be best. But also, you're not having like during the game, you're not going to have, switching players. Like you're in Call of Duty, you have players, your 4 players, and then that is your team. They have to be good at all the game modes. They have to work together in all the game modes, right? You're not going to have, although what it was kind of, it kind of seemed like at the start of the CDL that they were going to have like, big, huge rosters of, 6, 7, 8, even up to 10 players. And you're going to have this like, oh, maybe some people will come in just for search and destroy or just for hardpoint or just for control or whatever. And it just didn't work. Like you're not going to switch out your players that much. Like at some point your performance is going to fall off, is going to not be as good with your backup players. And, then you could be like, okay, we'll just sign the most talented players. Well, you're not going to have 10 of the most talented players in the league. Like they're going to want starting spots to play all the time. And that's what's hard about esports, is you don't have that rotation of a lineup unless you're just not playing well. You have 4 players. You might have 1 substitute, and then on the very rare occasion, you have an academy team with other players there. But a lot of the times, the star players in the league and the good players in the league are there because they are better than the academy team. Now, they might come in, perform okay personally, but then their team doesn't do well. So then it's like, okay, do we try to move that player into the starting lineup? Do we give this guy kind of like a week off and kind of see how we feel like this guy does in the team? Like there's not going to be that as much as people think they are. And GMs, they can do as much as they can do, but at some point, it's going to be a decision that's over their head that they don't have the authority to do. And then it's like, well, then your kind of job is pointless if you can't make that decision for the team. But then you have these head coaches that, what is truly their job, right? You talk to their teams, okay, yeah, we're joining this lobby, we'll schedule scrims at 3 o'clock or whatever. You go over their breakoffs, go over their tendencies. But in a lot of the cases, I mean, I could go through the entire list of the CDL, and there's one coach on a lot of these teams, and it just seems like coaches, either you don't want to spend the money for them because you don't think they're as useful as they are, or you're not utilizing them the right way, where if you were to have, let's just say, 2 coaches, like a head coach and a analyst or whatever position you want to give that second coach, an assistant coach, if you will, right? Your head coach, be that neutral voice in games. And I forgot to mention this earlier too, I'd love to see coaches back on the main stage. That might be a huge take and a hot take at the very least, but I would love to see the coaches back on the stage. At least the head coach or your designated coach on the stage. Or if it's, let's just say if it's hardpoint and control, you have your head coach there, but then you have like a search and destroy assistant coach or whatever that's all he does. It's kind of watch and studies and tries to develop these strategies for search and destroy, kind of knows how the other team plays, studies them, and all that stuff. Maybe you have him on the stage for the search and destroy, but then after that, then your head coach is there. Like, you could have such more use with coaches, and I feel like a lot of people don't take them seriously enough to where if you're utilizing them correctly and do what coaches are supposed to do, they can be very useful. However, with how much kind of weight and how much say the players have in game, out of game, who they want to play with, who they want to team with, and who don't they want on the team, that ultimately it's up to the players. And not that I want to treat esports like traditional sports. Like, obviously there's a very different dynamic with esports than traditional sports, but at some point you might have to team with somebody that's out of your kind of friend group, if you will, and your friendship, you might have to meet somebody new and hang out with somebody new, and maybe they're the new, you know, diamond in the rough, star on the block, and you're like, okay, like, this guy's not working, even though he's one of my best friends in the league. You know, we got to get this other guy because he's just playing out of his mind. And then that's a decision that the players aren't going to make because he's their friend, right? He wants them on the team. They want to play together. But then there's not that, like, ultimate authority kind of voice that says, hey, no, this guy's underperforming. He needs to be on the bench. We're going to pick up this guy. Let's see what he does. And then maybe, you know, if that doesn't solve the problem, then, you know, you figure out what else is going on. But I feel like there's not enough of that in the league. It's the players decide who they team with. The players decide, you know, who they pick up. The players decide everything. And I just don't feel like until we get to a certain point where the GM/coaches have that ultimate control, then that's not going to help. So, final thought is, are coaches useful or not? I think if utilized correctly, they could be. But I think right now in the CDL and a lot of the other esports, maybe not, well, some of the newer esports, I don't feel like they're utilized as much as they could be. And that could be a hot take, it could be not, but that's definitely something I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on down in the comments section. You know, it's a very interesting topic. It's one that's changed a lot throughout Call of Duty. And especially seeing some of the newer videos of people, you know, talking about this, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. So, with all that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, hit the like button down below if you haven't yet. Or if you're brand new here, make sure to subscribe. Turn those post notifications on so you never miss an upload. And don't forget, you can always change your mind later. But with all that being said, guys, we'll see you in the next one.
In the shadows.